I've watched a another Guy Ritchie movie. Now it's not exactly. I don't exactly watch these because I don't know. They're all fairly similar, aren't they? So far, I've watched three, I think. Yeah, they're fairly similar. It's not that I want to watch Mr. I mean, I watch most things anyway, so I don't watch just what I think I'd like and such. Um, Admittedly, I did start to watch his movies just because a few are on the top 250 and I still have no idea why they are. That's, I guess, for people to figure out. Now, this one, despite the similarity, is still highly rated on average, but not in the top 250, so who knows why. It's a mystery of how people rate in absolute mystery. So, anyway, I watched this very weird title. No idea why he thought of calling it that. I mean, there's very little reference to it. I'm sure they say the word sometimes, but makes little sense still. RocknRolla for some reason. I have no idea what's it got to do with gangsters. But anyway, yeah, so as usual, though, I do not think really. I mean, clearly he thinks that he can do comedy a bit, dark comedy at best. I don't think it's really possible in the sense. I mean, it does have comedy. It's not like it's not like it doesn't, but it's very very little, shall we say? It's not really, and it's just everything that happens. Might as well have Godfather have comedy. It's not quite appropriate, and it's not. To be honest, this wasn't the most violent movie I've ever watched in the genre, so it has that going for it. Although I'm assuming based on that, I think the others that I've watched were more violent, so I'm assuming it's not highly rated just because of that. I'm sure people always rate much higher just because something is violent. Yeah, and actually, I've only watched Snatch by him that is very similar. And he did direct apparently some others that aren't at all similar. Yeah, some I haven't watched either. I had no idea he directed Aladdin. Obviously, I'm assuming no at all similar. Um, I've also watched Sherlock Holmes by him. That has nothing to do with any of this, obviously, but that's just Sherlock Holmes, obviously. Yeah. I'm sure. I guess I mean, if I had to compare, I guess I get that. Just movies by the same director, and I prefer Sherlock Holmes. But honestly, ultimately, I guess I don't quite know how. I mean, he is supposed to be. He's called the gangster movie director. So yeah. Well, yeah. I don't think Sherlock Holmes is quite a gangster, but anyway, yeah. So but I, I never had any idea why Snatch is in top of it, and I don't hear it either. So I mean, yeah, in my opinion, even seven is on average too much. But I don't know. Maybe I'm not the audience here. I watch a bunch of movies that I'm likely not to like usually. It's not that I go in and I think I'm not going to like this. Full stop. I do try to give every movie a chance, obviously, and in comparison to some other things, like so, I've watched I mean I have watched a few of these actors' other movies, yeah, so Like, I've watched Idris Elba and The Take. Now, when it comes to stories, though, The Take is actually more interesting when it comes to stories. So it is actually more violent. So, but still, I guess, if a story is interesting, though, then it's interesting. The story here isn't quite very interesting. Obviously, they're trying to make it somewhat comedic as well. I don't think it's incredibly comedic, though. It's only ever so slightly. I'm assuming the fact that the painting is never shown is part of the comedy, but it's not quite hilarious, is it? Just because it's not shown. But yeah, Jared Butler, huh? This was before he forgot how to act, apparently, in the Fallen series. So yeah, that's what I mean. There are certainly worse movies for the same actors. But again, of course, actors do not choose to. I'm assuming so. He did choose that. I mean, I'm assuming he wasn't forced to act in it, and yeah, it's honestly the worst. I mean, I'd be very surprised if I find any similar movie uh, with a similar genre that is worse than that. He barely says anything as well, whereas here he does say stuff, some stuff, but ultimately it's not very, very. I've also watched another similar movie some weeks or months ago that I also commented on that also attempted to be somewhat comedic despite the violence, which was 11:45 something. Yeah, and in that specific case, I mean, I do not think one is much worse than the other. They're fairly similar, but that one actually, I think you could say, has even more violence. But they're quite similar anyway, so I'm not saying I prefer one over the other. I do not per se prefer this. I think it's mediocre though at best. So yeah, it's not quite. They're both mediocre, but that one did specifically try to use more violence, more blood as a vehicle to comedy somehow, and I don't think it would ever work. So in my opinion, for that reason, it's worse. Although, as I said in the other commentary, the first 10 minutes are brilliant, brilliant comedy and brilliant. If only it continued on like this. When it comes to this movie, though, yeah, I don't think there was any specific amount of time where it was very funny or just entertaining overall. It was all fairly similar, and I don't know honestly. Uh, it did seem to have a mixed reaction from the critics, which is reasonable, I suppose. At least it's not like oh, it's how sometimes they go on about weirdly about movies and how they think they're perfect and somehow have 100% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. I mean, I have no idea how any movie can be like that, honestly. Any really, because they're all they all have flaws, but sometimes it's really really baffling, Yeah. Anyway, yeah. This one though was when it comes to this genre though, I preferred the Limey, which I don't think has much comedy, but I preferred. This also tried something with the editing, to try to have strange sort of editing. So similarly to the Limey, it had also strange, but I preferred that one's editing, and the story is also more interesting, whereas this is more hectic and chaotic and a bit nonsensical. I mean, I'm not saying it's one of my favorite movies or anything in the Limey, but it's better than this one, I think. I preferred it better. I think the music, from what I remember, was pretty interesting as well. But yeah, ultimately, I mean, just at least it doesn't have so too much violence as opposed, indeed, to the Fallen movies, which are the worst trilogy ever, and hopefully it's just a trilogy. Gerard Butler seems to act worse and worse as time goes on. I don't know what it is, but anyway, this movie was mediocre at best.